Thank you for joining our webinar on measuring socially responsible public procurement. We are giving just a couple of more minutes to have more audience in the room, although I think that we already have quite an audience, so we'll wait a bit more for people to connect. Welcome to those who joined in the meantime. Perhaps we go first through the house rules. So if you want to use your microphone, you will have to unmute yourself. By default, you will be unmuted when joining the meeting. But if you wish to speak, please raise your hand and then unmute yourself. We are recording this webinar, so if you don't want to be audio recorded or filmed, please do not put on your camera, but if you wish to do so, you are also free to do so. There is also a chat button in case you would like to ask questions. There will be moments devoted to questions and answers during our session today, but we are also welcoming questions through the chat function. And this is the agenda for today. We will have a welcome and introduction by DG Grow, our colleague Lois Pimentel-Iglesias. After that, we will explain the purpose and objectives of the study on measuring social impact in public procurement. After that, we will present the analytical and evaluation framework that we developed within the scope of this project to measure social impact in public procurement. After that, we will have a short questions and answers session so that you can ask your questions regarding the framework and the study. After that, we will have a presentation from 2 different countries on how procurement authorities are integrating social considerations into public procurement. So we would like to share these practices with you so that you can get inspired and learn from them. Following these presentations, we will share with you some recommendations for developing social impact measurement policies in public procurement. And at the end, we will have some concluding remarks by our colleague Lois. Thank you very much for joining. I think that now we have a big audience with us, so thank you very much for joining. And I will give the floor to Lois.
Great. Thank you so much, Katarina. So first of all, welcome to everyone, and thank you for joining this webinar on SRPP, on Socially Responsible Public Procurement. My name is Lois, and I work at DG Grow. And if we go to the next slide, we will see that one of the main reasons why we are doing this webinar on Socially Responsible Public Procurement and this study that is behind this webinar is because in the Social Economy Action Plan that was launched in 2021, one of the actions that was there in order to support the social economy sector was this idea of providing better access to markets, to public markets in this case, for social economy entities. And of course, socially responsible public procurement is one of the ways through which public authorities can certainly try to include social economy entities when they purchase. Why also this is important? Well, because, and this is like a figure that we mentioned quite a few times, and is that public procurement represents 14% of the European Union gross domestic product. So that means that every year there is a very important quantity of money that can be precisely and that can be used in a strategic way to achieve other policy tools rather than let's say the satisfaction of buying or the convenience of buying a certain good or service. So the idea is precisely trying to move from a bureaucratic and legal task that can be sometimes seen in public procurement as a more strategic policy tool. And actually, the timing is also very convenient because, as you may know, the new European Commission, the new College of Commissioners, it was announced that there will be a revision of the public procurement directives, an evaluation of how these directives have worked over the last 8 to 10 years. So it's also very timely to also see how the socially responsible public procurement also worked. And so if we continue to the next slide, we will see, that's it, we will see the main 3 actions that we are carrying out at the moment in order to promote SRPP. First, you have there that we are developing trainings in 12 member states. On the right side of your screen, you can see some pictures of some of the trainings in Belgium or in Madrid in Spain. So these are physical trainings that happen in these 12 member states for both public buyers, public authorities, and social economy entities, because we thought that it was also very important to have this meeting in which both sides could meet together and could learn from each other what are the difficulties, what are the barriers, what business opportunities they offer. And after these trainings, there is also a discussion group in which different, let's say, recommendations and calls to actions are formulated both at regional, national level, and sometimes EU level too. And there's also a communication campaign, basically developing some videos promoting good SRPP examples. We have one video from Spain, from Belgium, from France. This month we will release a new one from Ireland, and we will also have one more from Bulgaria. Then we have the project 2, that is the project that is the reason because we are here today. So I will not go into detail in this one because we will have, of course, a lot of time to delve into this. And then we have also an internal evaluation on how the Commission itself, as a public buyer, incorporates socially responsible public procurement. And how we could further enhance this. So we go to the next slide. We will see the objectives of this webinar, and basically it's first present the work that has been done on preparing an analytical framework that allows us to have a clear idea of what social clauses, social considerations could be included in public procurement procedures, and to what extent this social impact can be measured. Then we will have, as mentioned by Katarina, 2 external speakers that will provide very interesting examples on how to practically incorporate socially responsible clauses in public procurement. And this will also, of course, facilitate the exchange of good practices, and we will also have time to share some key recommendations on how to better implement SRPP. Welcome again, and let's go ahead.
So, thank you very much, Lois. So if we go to the next slide, we will see that the main goal of this project was to develop a better understanding of current practices related to socially responsible public procurement, as well as impact measurement approaches and methodologies across the EU. This project is running already since September 2023, and it will finish by March 2025. So we are really on the last miles of the project. More specifically, this project aims at deepening knowledge of social impact measurement in public procurement across the EU, also to collect information on policies, methodologies, and guidelines in selected member states, namely sorry, so that I don't forget any of the member states: France, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Ireland, Italy, Lithuania, the Netherlands, Poland, Romania, Spain, and Sweden. We also analyzed social impacts of concrete socially responsible public procurement cases across the EU. Another objective was to create also content to promote dialogue on social investments among small and medium enterprises and public authorities. And finally, to offer recommendations for developing social impact measurement in public procurement. As part of this project, we have engaged different stakeholders, namely public authorities and particularly public procurement authorities in the different member states, as well as public procurement experts, non-governmental organizations, and the academia. So how have we organized the project? First of all, we conducted a mapping of approaches to measuring social impact in public procurement in 12 countries, the ones that I have just mentioned earlier. And in addition to this mapping exercise, we have also conducted interviews with more than 20 competent authorities and procurement bodies in these member states. The result of this activity was an overview of common approaches and challenges across the EU. In addition to this, and based on the information that we have collected, we have developed an analytical framework to measure social impact in public procurement. So we built on the mapping exercise that we have conducted, and we also carried out complementary desk research on mechanisms and techniques to measure social impact in socially responsible public procurement. To validate the exercise that we had undertaken, we organized a workshop with procurement experts to validate our approach. And as a result, we developed an analytical framework to measure social impact in public procurement. That comprises 4 indicators and 10 sub-indicators that my colleague Julia, who's sitting here next to me, will present in a couple of minutes. As part of this exercise, we also tested the framework that we have developed to make sure that it was fit for purpose. And to this end, we have analyzed a sample of 75 public procurement procedures covering all member states. We followed selection criteria to be able to have this sample. And after that, we conducted documentation for each of these public procurement procedures via desk research, and also contacting directly the procurement procedures responsible for these procedures. So we analyzed and assessed the social impacts of these procedures based on the analytical framework that we have developed. Finally, this project also contains an activity for communication and awareness raising, in which we have summarized the findings in an easy-to-consult format, and also to share inspirational examples. So for this, we are organizing 2 webinars. We had our first webinar on the 21st of November, and this is our last webinar now that we are here with you. We have developed 4 infographics and also a short video that are available on EISMEA's website. We are going to share the links to these materials after the webinar. If we go now to the next slide, I will give you the floor, Julia, to share the analytical framework that we have developed as part of this project. So the floor is yours.
Indeed. Thank you so much for that introduction, Katerina. So indeed, as Katerina highlighted, it is now our pleasure to introduce in a high-level way the analytical and evaluation framework to measure social impact in public procurement. So I will move to the next slide. So here on this slide, you can see the framework objectives and the research objectives. So with the overarching goal for the framework, we really aim to conceptualize an analytical framework that measures the social impact of public procurement. So what does that mean? It was designed to be applicable at all levels across member states, ensuring a comprehensive understanding of social outcomes. And to do so, we designed flexible indicators that could be adapted to specific contexts. So to briefly outline our research objectives, we analyze procurement procedures to assess the depth and comprehensiveness of social impact. And using the framework indicators, we aim to better understand how these procedures contributed to social goals. We wish to highlight good practices in socially responsible public procurement. And we also wanted to identify the key enablers and hindering factors in measuring social impact within public procurement. And finally, we also aim to provide some policy recommendations for EU-wide adoption on our research. So moving forward, I want to just spend a little time to highlight what do we actually mean when we say these 4 flexible indicators. So as aforementioned, they're designed to assess social outcomes for public procurement activities in a flexible way, so allowing them to be adapted to a particular context. So under the umbrella of each, you will see here, we also included sub-indicators. So I will now walk you through the 4 different indicators. So firstly, we have promoting employment opportunities and social inclusion. And so this evaluates public procurement procedures based on their impact on employment, skills development, and inclusivity. So you can see here under the sub-indicators, we have 4. And we have employment opportunities created as a sub-indicator, skills development, inclusion of disadvantaged groups, and compliance with standards and certifications. Moving forward, on encouraging decent working conditions, this indicator really evaluates the quality of employment contracts, the job security, fair wages, safety, non-discrimination, and grievance mechanisms in procurement practices. And then here under these, we have 2 sub-indicators, including employment status, and fair working conditions. Then for indicator 3, we have supporting accessibility and design for all. So this indicator assesses procurement procedures for compliance with accessibility standards, universal design principles, and the use of assistive technologies. And then we have indicator 4, which evaluates corporate sustainability efforts and supply chain fairness, including ethical sourcing and supplier treatment. And under which we have the sub-indicator corporate sustainability, due diligence, and fair supply chain. So we can now move forward to the next slide. And here I want to just briefly walk you through the process in which we tested the analytical framework on real SRPP cases. So firstly, the SRPP cases were identified through searches in TED. So that's the Tenders Electronic Daily and National Procurement Data Portals. We also contacted procurement authorities in EU member states to collect more documentation or identify any additional procurement procedures. Secondly, we mapped the SRPP cases into an analysis-based database, and hereby meaning a structured database was created to reflect the analytical framework indicators, and a high-level assessment was then conducted to evaluate the coverage of the indicators by each procurement procedure. And then we have the analysis of the coverage of the SRPP indicators. So this was an in-depth analysis of the procurement procedures was performed with qualitative and textual annotation of the findings. So we really looked at the procurement documentation, such as the tender specifications and relevant annexes. The analysis focused, of course, on the coverage of the 4 main indicators that I've outlined previously. And then we have a scoring system. So scores were assigned to each of the sub-indicators and indicator according to the analytical framework. A final social performance label was assigned to each procedure, ranging from non-impactful to transformative. And lastly, the main findings, of course, included different impact levels and categorizing the procurement procedures accordingly. So we understand that maybe you want to understand how we actually derive these social impact results. So we just want to briefly highlight how each of the public procurement procedures were scored. So you'll see here on the left-hand side, the main weighting comes from the total performance scores. So how to calculate that, we basically assigned scores 0 to 5 to each of the sub-indicator. We calculated an average score for each of the indicator, and we combined these averages to get the total performance score. But we also wanted to reward procedures that were holistic in their approach. So this meant that we also looked at to how many indicators each procurement procedure addressed. So you can see that this had a 10% weighting, and if it had, for example, addressed all 4 indicators, there was a full bonus. Whereas, for example, if only 2 indicators were addressed, there would be a 25% bonus. Lastly, we also wanted to look at how well the depth is captured. So this is the depth of the social impact within each indicator. So for each indicator relevant for a given procurement procedure, it was rewarded the number and effectiveness of sub-indicators. And you can see that was also weighted at 10%. And cumulatively, this together then made the social impact rating. I'm now going to hand over the floor to my colleague Claudio, who is going to outline in a bit more depth the categorization that I outlined in step 5.
Yeah, thank you, Julia. Thank you to the previous speakers. Yeah, so as we were mentioning before, each procurement procedure was analyzed and the social impact rating derived in the form of a normalized scoring percentage. So here you can see the scale that we used, and it ranged from assigning a label of non-impactful to those procurement procedures that had minimal or no specific requirements for social conditions, all the way through low impact, moderate impact, and high impact procurement procedures to get to transformative ones, which were those with the highest score between 85 and 100% according to our scale, which included the most ambitious procurement procedures with comprehensive and detailed requirements and monitoring systems. So to delve into the some main findings of our analysis, we can go to the next slides, and we can see 2 charts. The one on the left provides the overall social performance of the procurement procedures analyzed in our sample, and we can see how most of the procurement procedures we analyzed were categorized as low or moderate impact, respectively 31 and 28 procedures. We highlighted the sample that we analyzed included a total 75 procurement procedures, while fewer ones achieved a higher or even a transformative impact, only 4 out of the total sample we analyzed. And looking and having a small breakdown per level of public sector administration, we see that when it comes to procurement procedures conducted at national level, so by national purchasing body, let's say, 11 out of 24 were low impact and only 1 was transformative. When it comes to procurement procedures acting at regional level, we see a relatively homogeneous distributions of the procedures across the 5 impact levels. As you can see from the chart there, it's the dark brown bars. And when it comes to local purchasing bodies, also here we see how most of the procedures were categorized as moderate impact or low impact. Some had more substantial outcomes, but basically these reflected, let's say, the overall social performance identified on the chart with the chart that you saw on the left before. And so after this, we would like to give you another overview that you see in this slide. Here you have the findings per indicator. As you remember, Julia before described how the analytical framework is structured, which indicators it included. And here you see how our sample covered the 4 indicators in terms of how many procurement procedures touched upon each one of the indicators. Each procurement procedure could touch upon multiple indicators, of course, and here you see that the one that was mostly, let's say, in bold or touched upon by the procurement procedures we analyzed was indicator 1, promoting employment opportunities and social inclusion. 83% of the procurement procedures analyzed covered touched upon this indicator. And also indicator 2, encouraging decent working conditions, and 4, promoting sustainable practices were quite, let's say, adopted or considered relevant, let's say, by public procurers when launching their procedures. We noticed a smaller coverage of indicator 3 when it comes to accessibility and design for all, only 48% of the procedures. So this is an initial finding, Of course, we had a limited sample that we could analyze, so take these results as let's say a partial let's say outcome. We didn't analyze the entire public procurement market, but this is some initial food for thought that can be useful for procurement authorities and policymakers. And the last chart here on the right that focuses on social impacts, on the social impact score per indicator. Well, as part of our analysis, of course, we try to see whether procurement procedure was touching upon or considering a specific social dimension, but also the depth of the impact, as Julia was mentioning before. So based on that, we can see what was the average score for the entire sample across the 4 indicators. And we see that the highest depth, or let's say impact, was registered when it comes in relation to the indicator encouraging decent working conditions. So the criteria set by public procurers when it comes to encouraging decent working conditions were considered the most effective ones, followed by those related to accessibility and design for all, when these were included. And then also followed by promoting employment opportunity and social inclusion. And the less effective or impactful considerations or requirements, at least according to other sample, were considered were those related to promoting sustainable practices, at least according to our analysis. And so moving to the next slide, we have some takeaways that refer to both our analysis and also in general to this exercise of developing and testing the framework. So as you know, SRPP can definitely drive transformative social impact, and of course continuous improvement and innovation in SRPP practices should be supported. As we saw in the previous chart, there could be some improvement in terms of depth, especially of how the social criteria are defined and applied. Employment, social inclusion are definitely dimensions that are well covered, while aspects of accessibility are less promoted. And in general, the highest impact was observed in decent working conditions and sustainable practices. So why this framework is relevant? Because it provides some indicators and tools, and in general, a methodology that can be used to measure according to a common scale the impact of SRPP, and can enhance the ability to align procurement with broader social and environmental goals. Of course, as we said, there were some limitations and challenges, including, for instance, the fact that the sample we analyzed was small. So our findings can provide some initial good food for thought and some insights that, of course, should be further investigated, maybe in future studies. But also one thing that we registered was sometimes the difficulty in collecting data, information, or even the contact detail of the procurement authorities that we had to contact to gather more documentation. So this is another insight that may be known to many of you, but that we wanted to raise as a challenge and limitation we encountered. Having said that, I think we can move to the next slide and launch our Q&A. So if you have any question, you can post them in the chat. We'll be happy to answer. But of course, even if you have questions that will come to you later on, you can still post them in the chat during the following presentations. We will reply to them in written. So feel free to ask any question. Otherwise, we can even move directly to the following presentations. We will leave just a bit more of time if you have any doubts so far, or if you would like any more clarification.
What was the level of involvement from Romanian experts? So we interviewed the Public Procurement Authority in Romania to obtain more information regarding the policy approaches that are being adopted in the country. Romania is still in its initial phases of introducing socially responsible public procurements into their strategic approach towards public procurement. And then we analyzed, can colleagues remember any procedures we analyzed for Romania? 1, 2, 2. And then we also contacted the authorities to obtain additional information. I think that this was about it. I hope that we answered your question, Alina. Question from Hannah.
Yeah, to Anna, I can take this question. So, no, we, of course, in order to understand also the depth of the impacts of the procurement procedures, we try to identify at least procurement procedures that had some social consideration already included. So we didn't focus only on those that were based on price only, but that had some quality criteria related to social aspects. And so, as we said, we didn't analyze the entire public procurement market, but tried to gather information on how procurement authorities, when they include social considerations, what type of social considerations they include, and let's say how in depth they do it, how detailed they are when trying to achieving a social goal for public procurement.
But as we will see also later in our webinar, this criterion is actually hampering the use of socially responsible public procurement, the impact of social considerations in public procurement. Then we have another question. You were going to take that one as well, Claudio?
I just wanted to finish my answer for Anna. So Anna, but definitely what we registered or what we could understand also through the interviews was the fact that, yeah, sometimes including additional considerations related to social aspects, so adding, let's say, quality criteria on top of lowest price, was perceived as an additional complexity, yes. But on the other hand, we also noticed that in some countries that are already, let's say, guidelines or strategic policy approaches or programs that are trying to pursue, let's say, stronger use of socially responsible public procurement. So let's say many countries are in a transition process, let's say, under this point of view. They see we publish the methodology. Maybe I can take this one. Is the one I guess.
There is another one before that. So have you measured the actual impact, for example, of employment rates, fair wages? Does it increase the competitiveness in public procurement? This is not the purpose of these analytical frameworks. So what we have done was to analyze specific public procurement procedures and how they embed social considerations into their documentation. So we did not do this sort of exercise, and it's also not the purpose of this framework to go this far. And then did we involve and interview users about their experience of disadvantage and social considerations? We did not, because it was also not the purpose of this framework to discuss the direct impact that public procurement had on them. Is DC going to publish the methodology? I would say hopefully yes, but Lois, I'm looking at you.
Yes, thank you. Yes, indeed, DC will publish the report of this study, where you will be able to see all the methodology and more in detail all the conclusions and findings. It will be published most probably, I will come back to this later, but in the Social Economic Gateway. So that's a website that you can check, and also in our LinkedIn group if you want to also follow that, EU for Social Economy and Social Enterprises. So yes, it will be shared and it will be published in the next months.
Yeah, and if I can add to this, after the workshop, you will receive a thank you email with some useful links to other resources from other European initiatives that can be also useful to grow, let's say, understanding or knowledge about SRPP. We did not involve users, but indeed we had, as mentioned before, an expert workshop that included not only procurement authorities, when we were defining the analytical framework. So in that workshop, also perspectives, not purely from the public administration point of view, were raised. So yeah, so in any case, we also tried to expand a bit the type of stakeholders we consulted as part of the study.
Mm-hmm. Then the involvement of experts from the Balkans region. So we focused on the first activity of the project on 12 member states, and those member states were consulted, and then I cannot recall exactly who participated in the workshop. If there were any experts from these regions. Looking at the colleague.
Not specifically from the Balkan region, not in that.
And then we have a follow-up question from Anna.
No, Anna, because yeah, in fact, our focus was on let's say a more strategic procurement angle, focusing on social considerations. So we focused really on social criteria included and how detailed these were. We didn't map, for instance, the use of low price only, or this. What we tried to map instead was synergies with green aspect, with green procurement aspect. So whether there was a combination of social and environmental aspects in the procurement procedures, even if for the purpose of our scoring, we focused on social dimensions only. But we try to map the presence of green aspects.
Okay, we will take perhaps 2 additional questions. So from Constantino, different countries have different social considerations mandated as a minimum in public procurement. How did you take this into account? For example, in Spain, there is a need to have general quality plans to bid for public tenders. Well, this is not the case in other countries, indeed. So, but let me go back to the objectives of this study. So here we are focusing not on how social considerations are integrated into public procurement, but rather we were collecting approaches to measure socially responsible public procurement. So the angle was slightly different. It is true that when we analyzed the public procurement procedures, we were not taking into account what is mandated or not in each member state. What we wanted to assess is how these social considerations are taken into account in the public procurement documentation that are part of the public procurement procedures. So we were not taking into account if a specific country mandates X or Y, but rather as a whole, how are social considerations taken into account, and how, and if and how they are measured as well. Because this is also one of the findings of our study, that the measurement side is still quite underdeveloped across the member states. Link to the group. Okay, Lois has already responded to this, and I think that we are over with our questions, unless we have 1 minute more, unless someone still would like to ask one final question. Otherwise, we will give the floor to our guests. Let's give the floor to our guest speakers, and we will start with Giampaolo Sellito from Italy. He's an IT specialist at the National Anti-Corruption Authority in Italy. Welcome, Giampaolo. The floor is all yours. Bit of suspense.
Sorry for this interruption, but I don't know what happened. For this invitation to explain what was the approach here in Italy to social and more on social, but also on other strategic considerations, the approach to measuring social impact in public procurement. I am Giampaolo Sellito. I work for the National Anti-Corruption Authority in Italy, which is also the body in charge of public procurement supervision and public procurement monitoring. And I will explain what we did in the last 3 or 4 years about the inclusion of social considerations in public procurement at national level. ANAC, the National Anti-Corruption Authority, has 3 fields of action, of interest, and the prevention of corruption as administrative measures to prevent corruption from happening both in public procurement, but also in government, in the administrative process of public administrations. Transparency, which is another topic of interest. We are the national authority for promoting transparency at the national level, and the supervision of public contracts. In this approach that has multiple dimensions, we also devised, next slide please, we devised how to include social and generational and also environmental consideration in public procurement, issuing guidelines for public buyers, so for contracting authorities, and some so now to structure the call for tenders, and how to include social and environmental considerations as part of a national strategy for sustainable public procurement, but also in view of fostering responsible business conduct, which is one of the points of attention for the prevention of corruption. As part of our mandate, we promote ethics and integrity in public administration and in public procurement, and this can be done setting a triple bottom line for public procurement that is not only looking at the most economical advantageous offer, but also including considerations about the social environment and how public procurement can help in building a better society. So how can we do this? We can do this charging contracting authorities of the mission of fostering also the social and environmental transformation of public procurement. This is part of our anti-corruption strategy. It is part of the plan for national plan for anti-corruption, for prevention of corruption, which is issued by ANAC, but it is the base, the national strategy that shall be adopted by each public administration or public entity with their own plan for transparency and plan for integrity. One of the other point of attention for us is for our mission is the digitalization of public procurement, since we also believe that digitalization is a key enabler for transparency. And transparency is a way to help civil society organizations, citizens, which are the ultimate beneficiaries of public procurement, in monitoring public procurement, and a way to monitor public procurement, the results of public procurement, a way to monitor if public procurement delivers what is promised by this overall strategy, is to monitor the uptake of green and social considerations into the way that is used by contracting authorities to do public procurement. To monitor the uptake of green social procurement strategy requires data about contract implementation, which is not completely covered by IFORMS, by the usual data that are collected by regulatory bodies or by contracting authorities at this moment. And it is also it also requires collecting data about what is the way that is used by contractors to implement the public the services, or to or what is about the way the goods, the supplies are delivered, are designed to meet these requirements. Next slide, please. So it is something that is complex. We adopt a policy monitoring cycle in our way of monitoring public procurement in Italy. We involve all the stakeholders. This means that we involve central purchasing bodies, contracting authorities, but also civil society organizations, citizens in monitoring public procurement. This is very important, since the last mile can be covered only at local level. That is, we operate at central, at national level. Our inspectors, our assessment procedures can only monitor a fraction of public procurement at national level. but the real monitoring shall be done by those that are the beneficiaries of public procurement. The policy cycle is done by setting clear policy objectives, issuing guidelines, issuing a national action plan to reach these objectives, defining the criteria, the indicators, setting target values for these objectives, which has been done 10 years ago, 15 years ago in 2009 for green public procurement, which now is mainstream at national level, which was done 3 years ago in the national recovery strategy for the uptake of social considerations. We collect published data. We improve transparency at national level. We foster transparency at national level, and it is important to get stakeholders involved in monitoring, and this is the cycle. Next slide. The next slide. Okay. In order to have a concrete view of what we do, we included a specific action in the National Open Government Plan. We led an action, and this action was about the empowerment of civil society organizations in using ANAC's data. We publish open data. We have an open data portal where we publish all the data about public procurement in Italy. We collect data for each procedure from 0 to any value of the procedure in any sector. We publish this data about public procurement, both on below threshold public procurement and above threshold public procurement. And we explained, worked together with civil society organizations, explaining and teaching how to link ANAC's dataset with other open data. We cannot collect data about everything, but there are other open data sources at national level, since in Italy we have a strategy for proactive transparency. So the Freedom of Information Act is not only about the citizens can access government data, but government shall publish data that are important for society, for the attainment of social objectives. And through open data and open standard, we want to foster inclusiveness and participation in the monitoring of public spending. The action was a concrete action where we worked together with more than 20 organizations, and we produced a guide on how to use ANAC's data and how to link ANAC's data to monitor contracts financed by the Recovery and Resilience Fund in Italy. And through this guide, we wanted to empower citizens in monitoring public spending. Next slide, please. I included the links to this to the description of to the deliverable of this action. A central asset that we exploited to monitor public procurement, monitor public spending, is the National Database of Public Contracts, which is operated by ANAC. We have over 70 million of contracts from 2007 to 2024, and this is fed by approximately 40,000 contracting authorities. By this year, we reduced the number of contracting authorities here in Italy of active contracting authorities, that is, those that can actually contract and not only buy using the national framework agreements, to around 10,000. And we have about 250 companies that are contractors of public funds. Next slide, please. One of the results of this action was the monitoring of gender and generational balance in public procurement. 4 years ago, we did not have any structured mean to monitor this uptake. So monitoring had to be done going to the analyzing the procedure, using the textual references, but this was not something that was enough to monitor the uptake of national strategy. So we proceeded in this manner. ANAC mandated to include gender and generational balances clauses in any procedure. The inclusion of this procedure had to be done in a structured way, and in the data that contracting authorities shall send to ANAC, in the data that ANAC collects about public procurement, we included the two further data fields. And the approach was of the type, comply with our rules or justify why you did not comply. The contracting authorities had to comply or justify why they did not include these clauses in public procurement, especially in the contracts financed by the Recovery and Resilience Fund. In order to receive the funds, they had to include these clauses, these gender and generational clauses, and we collected the data, published this data as open data. The publication of this data was of paramount interest for data journalists and for citizens organizations, civil society organizations that were promoting gender considerations, gender balance strategy, or generational balance strategies. We can say that we saw a lot of newspaper news and articles, papers about what happened in Italy in these last 2 years in this field, so in the promotion of gender and generational balance in public procurement. And the impact was measured by ANAC and the other stakeholders, those civil society organizations participating in the open government strategy, in terms of published news in the main newspapers, campaigns, and other advocacy by civil society organizations. So it was a successful action. I must just explain why sometimes contracting authority did not include this consideration, this these clauses in public procurement. Since at times you have to gender and generational considerations are not the only ones that must be taken into account. Imagine a contract that is, imagine that a contracting authority has a contract in place that is going to an end and has to launch a call for tender for a new contractor for that specific contract and wants to maintain the occupational levels in the area, or wants to, that the new contractor hires the workers of the old contractor in order to preserve that workforce. In this case, it is likely that you cannot have a generational balance, or you cannot have a gender balance, since the old contractor did not respect the parameters or the indicators that we set up at national level. So there is some trade-off that must be taken into account. Next slide, please. I will leave you the slides. You will find some links to the relevant resources, data resources, especially that you can use if you want to see what is the situation at national level in Italy. Again, I shall highlight that we have a lot of open data sources, public open data sources in Italy, since we have a public open data strategy that is going on from more than 20 years, more than 10 years that we have a clear strategy on publishing all the government data as open data. Next slide, please. And so we have still some ongoing actions, since in the new open government, the continuation of this of the action of open data. Also, we included some actions on the ethical use of the AI to help in the application of national strategies for gender generation balance, but not limited to this. And mainly, we have a strategy for the promotion of inclusiveness in the access to technologies and the use of artificial intelligence, and to strengthen data transparency and openness, to create public value and then recovery resilience fund to citizens. So technology are a great tool to improve and to promote the use of data as a common good. And a transparency model focused on public value, we believe that can be of paramount importance also to foster to push forward the strategic procurement and social procurement. That's all on my side. I'm open to your questions. I will leave you the slides. You will find there some useful resources. Thanks for this. Thank you for this. I saw that the. If you want that, I will respond after.
Indeed, we have, thank you so much, Gianpaolo, for that presentation. Indeed, we have the opportunity for a Q&A session coming up, but now we would be honored to introduce our next speaker, Vinay Fantu from Piano. I would like to give you the floor now.
I think we cannot hear you, Renee. Or is that me?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear
Okay.
you. Thank you.
Sorry, I don't know. It went back again. I had apologies. I was just wondering, we're a bit out of schedule. Do I still have 15 minutes, or would you want me to shorten the presentation?
Yes, please take the 15 minutes.
Okay. Okay, my name is Renee. I work for Piano, which is the Dutch Public Procurement Expertise Center, which is focusing mostly on professionalizing procurement related to law. But my team is focusing on more the social and green public procurement. The next slide, please. I would like to give you some examples from the Netherlands. First of all, I would like to start with a very short introduction of the social themes that are part in the Dutch policy frameworks for sustainable procurement. And I want to emphasize, when I say sustainable public procurement, I mean also socially responsible public procurement, and both the green and the social public procurement. The terms are sometimes a bit combined. I will then tell you something about the self-assessment tool, which was used in the Netherlands as well. Give you an example of the city of Rotterdam. And then at the end, I would give you like a short introduction to the guide we developed some years ago on all the different tools for measuring social impact. And next slide, please. In the Netherlands, we have a national plan for sustainable public procurement. It's a cooperation between 7 ministries, and it runs from 2001 till 2025. And the plan is actually targeting all government levels, so including water authorities, municipalities, provinces. And related to this plan, we also have a manifest, which is based on the same 6 themes, except that it's also added ordering in its title to emphasize the relevance for internal clients to incorporate social and green goals in tenders or procurement. The mission of our sustainable public procurement team within Piano is to use public procurement power to help the Netherlands transition to an environmentally aware, social and inclusive society. In total, the 6 themes we are focusing on, they consist of 3 green themes and 3 social themes. For now, I will just shortly introduce the 3 social themes. I think they're very similar also to what we've heard before, but I think it's good to give a bit of the context. So on the next slide, the first theme we focus on is supply chain responsibility, and it relates to issues like child labor, forced labor, or deforestation. It's based on the UN Guiding Principles for Business Rights, Human Rights and Businesses, and the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises on responsible business conduct. Central public government authorities, they have to include international social condition, we call it, an ISV, in contracts as a special implementation condition within 8 high-risk categories, such as clothing and data centers. And the condition requires suppliers to be transparent about the supply chain, to analyze risks, to draft an action plan, and to communicate on progress. The second theme on the next slide is about diversity and inclusion. I think it is also mentioned, it's not a new theme, of course, it's something that's there for a long time. Where diversity is something you can measure, inclusion is more of a choice. And for now, we see mostly it applied in labor-related tenders, but there is a lot more possible for the future. And the third theme on the next slide relates to social return, and that focuses mostly to stimulate labor participation for people with a distance to the labor market. This can both be done by creating extra jobs as well as related to procuring from social enterprises. On the next slide, I would like to give a bit of details on the self-assessment tool. The self-assessment tool, it is filled out by procurement authorities themselves. The tool was developed for signatories of the manifests, and the tool is available free of charge for all government authorities, public authorities. That they receive an overview of tenders from TenderNet, which is the Dutch TED, and it lists the tenders, and the authorities add whether they have included social or environmental issues in the tender. So the tool, what does it generate? It gives organizations, public procurement authorities, an overview of their results as an organization on a tender level, if they want to that, or on an organizational level. That is why it's called a self-assessment tool. But at the same time, the tool is used for central government because they are obliged to fill it out. It's mandatory to use this tool, and it's used for the annual operational management report. And if we add all the figures up from central governments and local governments, it gives a picture of where we stand related to the national plan. Last year, April, we published, like the year before, an overview of all the data in the tool. And next slides, I will give you some example of the graphs we see. This graph is shown in procurement. Sorry, this is in all the graphs that we show. It is in number of tenders as well as in procurement value. In this case, you see first the number of tenders, and it contains 1,200 tenders that were added with environmental or social data in the tool over 2023. It represented a 10 billion, which is, of course, a substantial amount of data, but not still covering the 100 billion that was annually done. What do you see? If you see the orange bars, you can see that how often in a tender environmental, climate, or other issues are included. And then for the social return, you can see the last bar is the most applied theme, but it's still, if you look at the number of tenders, still slightly less than half. If you move on to the next slide, you will see that looking at the procurement value, it is more than half, so more than 50%. This means that for bigger tenders, there are often more environmental or social themes applied. Also, when you look at the left side, you see that the orange bars have raised. So for bigger tenders, environmental issues are more often included. Which I can't show you on this graph, but looking at the figures from last year, we see a growth of attention for supply chain, and we can also see that it's mostly that still diversity and inclusion is still a challenge. I think it's similar to what was presented in the overview before. On the next slide, all the graphs that you see, they are also divided by works, services, and supplies. Why we do this? Because it gives you useful insights of the different possibilities that there are. You see quite a different picture from each of the slides. And also what we have within the self-assessment tool on the next slide is a so-called spend impact analysis. and it gives you an overview of all the tenders and the potential negative impact they have. In this case, it's on the environmental data or themes only, because for now they are only available for environmental impacts. They are based on the National Institute for Public Health and Environment in the Netherlands. They have calculated based on 10 sectors the average negative impact. So what do you see on this graph? On the left side, the left column, you see the total spent in euros, and then divided, it's 26 billion, and then divided by the sectors you see on the most right, explained with the colors. And the second left, it's a graph where you see difference, how it's divided, looking at the total CO2 emissions as an indicator for climate. What you, for example, see is that transport relatively to spend grows on this chart, as well as energy or construction. The third from the left, it relates to land use in hectares as an indicator for biodiversity, amongst other things. What you see, for example, is that catering is the turquoise on the top. It's relatively small, but looking at land use, it becomes a relatively relevant part of the total land use. The fourth column relates to resource use in tons, and it's an indicator for circularity. For example, construction, again, you see a clear rise from the first and the last bar. What does it show? It shows potential relevant themes to be included in different tenders. So if you're gonna have a tender in, you can see where you can be most impactful, and also looking backward, you can see whether you've taken into account maybe the right issues looking at this graph. Then now it's time for me to show you some of the example of Rotterdam. The city of Rotterdam was one of the first to not only have the environmental impacts shown in a spent impact analysis, but also have social issues included in a spent impact analysis. They were presented. Sorry, the sheets are a bit too fast, but it's okay. I can show you. It's okay. They were presented on the conference, and they're also available on the Piano website. This is how the figure looks. If you look at the data they have used, were actually their own data, so it was not based on a calculation model like it was for the environmental data. This was actually on their own data that they could trace that was spent on social return. On the left side, you see the different income or procurement segments they use, such as care or ICT. On the second from the left, you see the total spent by segment, and then the third, you see the percentage of social return spent by segment. So you see, for example, a raise relatively, if you look at the care, that there's more social return opportunities or spent in jobs or other possibilities to use social return. Then the far most right one, it is the percentage of social return spent by segment based on the spend of that segment. So actually on the amount from the third bar related to the first. What did it show for Rotterdam? It did not really have new, like it's a complete surprise. It's quite likely that care is a chance, it has a lot of opportunities for realizing social return, but using it as based on data, it could convince management that, for example, it should be more ambitious ambitious in certain segment. And it gives a good insight to see where the opportunities are most relevant. Then on the next slide, you can see a similar kind of figure, but then related to the spend, translated to supply chain responsibility opportunities, or risks. Actually, in this case, it's more appropriate to say risks. On the most left, you see again the different procurement segments. On the second of the left, you see total spend again by the segments, and then on the third you see a division of how it is classified as high risks, and then on the most right you see how that relates to high risk products. It's unfortunately all in Dutch, but it gives an idea. For example, if you look at the lowest one, the civil engineering, you can see that it relates to natural stone and street lighting. In Rotterdam, for example, they do include supply chain responsibility not only as a minimum requirement, like I mentioned before, in the contract phase, but also in the awarding of tenders. These graphs can make you help to make data-driven choices. The next slide, if it's okay, you can move on. On the next slide, the last topic I wanted to share with you, that in 2022, we made a guide, because in the Netherlands there's an overwhelming number of tools. It can be certificates or monitoring tools or measuring tools, and public authorities that wanted to work with social return, they were a bit overwhelmed. So we decided to make a guide that helps you find the right tool, or at least explain also where the tool is focusing on. Of course, the list we have of the tools is not complete. It was the most common ones in the Netherlands in 2022. We will also update it. One of the most important things is that we looked at the phase that it could be used. It's in the preparation phase, or the tendering phase, or the implementation phase. And it was based on questions like the theme, so employment, or is it focusing on the SDGs, or what goal do you want? Is it for measuring or monitoring, or do you need it as a proof that it's a social enterprise? For example, in the Netherlands, social handprint is a measuring tool. Whether we use as monitoring tools, or the self-assessment tools also monitoring tool. And we also have certificates that show that it's a social enterprise, or registers where they can be registered. I hope you, this unfortunately is all very much in Dutch, so I can give you some links to the websites, but then you will need to translate it. Please feel free to, if you have any questions, to contact me. That was my talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee, for your presentation. We will now open the floor for just a couple of questions directed to the speakers. So we will try. I see that Gianpaolo has already been responding directly on the chat. Thank you so much. And maybe we take just one question for Renee. How is flexible work, which we see in the indicators, taken into account?
I don't understand the question. How is flexible work taken into account? I'm not sure. Is that question to me?
Yes, yes, or maybe we take another one, which is about the administrative burden. So how is the administrative burden embraced at the level of users for implementing social policies?
Oh, yes, that's quite do you the burden to actually what we say to use the tool is not complicated if the tool is filled out by someone who did the tender, so then it's relatively easy to add whether social or environmental criteria have been asked, or is it more in general administrative burden? It's specifically the question to the self-assessment tool or more in general? Alina? My answer related to the self-assessment tool is that if it's filled out by public authorities that are or by people that are involved in the tender, it's not such a big administrative burden. But if it's done by somebody else that has to search for the right answers, it can be more time-consuming.
Mm-hmm. All right. So given the time at the moment, if you could kindly respond directly on the chat to the questions that have been asked regarding the presentations of our guest speakers, we would very much appreciate it. I would like to thank very, very much to Gianpaolo and to Renee, who joined us today for this session. Your presentations have been really insightful and inspiring for others. Thank you so much. And now maybe we move to our final slides. So first of all, we would like to do a reflection on the challenges and the success factors, so the enablers that we have encountered in our analysis. I will mention them briefly so that we do not go much over time. So as challenges, we noticed that there is still a widespread use of the lowest price criterion, which focuses on cost savings, and these result in overlooking social impact, and there are therefore missed opportunities for fair wages, employment for disadvantaged groups, and sustainability. There is also misalignment of social clauses to contract subject matter, in which higher social impacts have been found in service-related contracts and less in other types of contracts like goods and infrastructure. There is also lack of ambition in social clauses, so we found mostly vague and modest requirements that resulted then in limited social impact. And finally, there are also inadequate monitoring mechanisms. So there is a lack of robust monitoring during contracting period, and it's also difficult to assess the true effectiveness of the social objectives that are put forward in the public procurement procedures. On the other hand, we also found some enablers. So, for instance, when there are reserved contracts for social enterprises, because it encourages the participation of disadvantaged groups and also promotes social inclusion and economic empowerment. Also, the use of contractual performance clauses and award criteria, which ensures adherence to labor laws, fair wages, sustainability, and also other requirements that have been mentioned by our audience today. And also holds contractors accountable for social responsibilities. Another enabler is the multiple clauses and criteria to support social outcomes that are structured approaches to achieving social goals, which rely on mechanisms like social return on investment. And finally, the combination of environmental and social requirements, which enhances then the overall impact of procurement and ensures that suppliers address a broader range of societal challenges. If we go to the next slide, we would also like to share some recommendations that we drew based on the analysis that we have undertaken. So we would recommend following a more holistic approach to socially responsible public procurement that integrates all aspects for a better social performance and that fosters collaboration between different stakeholders, so public authorities, contractors, and civil society organizations. Also to elevate socially responsible public procurement by implementing strategic policies that enhance specifically social considerations and that prioritize high impact procurement procedures. At another level, it's also important to standardize these practices across the EU, because now we really saw a variety of approaches, and still many of them also in a very premature phase of implementation and adoption. So here we recommend adopting uniform standards for employment, conditions, and sustainability, and also to ensure compliance and monitoring. And related to these, then to also have a comprehensive monitoring and reporting, because this was really something that we missed from the analysis that we have undertaken, so from the cases that we have selected. Finally, it's also important to improve data availability and transparency, because there was really a low quality of data that we found in the documentation that we retrieved, and also to conduct regular audits and independent assessments of how social considerations are taken into account in public procurement procedures. And finally, to expand and foster the use of a framework to measure socially responsible public procurement. So as a follow-up of this study, it would be important to create templates, compliance checklists, and reporting protocols that could support authorities in this process of analyzing and evaluating, monitoring, following up on how they are doing in terms of the integration of social considerations into their public procurement procedures, to organize pilot programs, and also to foster experience exchange and awareness raising, as we are doing today in this webinar. And now, Lois, I'm really sorry we are over time, but we still would like to give you the floor for your concluding remarks. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Very briefly, well, first of all, I just wanted to say thank you to the speakers, to Gianpaolo, to Renée, and also, of course, to PwC, Clay, Catarina, Claudia, Julia, for your work. Just one last word on summarizing a bit these findings. I believe that this framework that was developed is very interesting in order to think about these 4 indicators and trying to see which indicators of these could be included in public procurement practices. And what I would also want to highlight, if we already go to the next slide, is that after this webinar, you will receive an email with some links to some studies, to some websites that I advise you for sure to follow, because we will publish this report where you will be able to see into more detail, as I previously said, all the work that has been done in this study. Also, you will receive some videos with interesting SRPP cases that can inspire you. So that's it from my side. Thank you so much. And I don't know if you would like to say last word, Catarina, Julia, or Claudio. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Lois, and Anna, who is also in the call with us. And our colleagues from ICLEI, as Lois has said, this was a joint effort from PwC and ICLEI. Thank you very much to our audience who has been together with us in this webinar up until now, or during the period that you could attend. And we hope that the session has been relevant, insightful, and inspirational to you. Thank you so much. And as Lois already announced, we are going to follow up with an email with additional resources. Thank you.